Hello, and in this video this will start off our character tutorials. I say character, I mean any sort of humanoid figure. Also you'll get the principles needed to make any other character at all, so monsters, so on and so forth. It doesn't really matter. There's no sort of, I think I should say this, there's no sort of fixed way of doing anything. There's no sort of follow a tutorial and you're going to be able to make a monster at the end of this. It's not like that. And it's the same with this. It's not going to be a case of follow this tutorial and you're going to be able to make a humanoid character by the end of this. You know, it requires practice, it requires study. But hopefully what these tutorials will do is help you establish at least a base, or give you some tips for how to start a character, and then the detailing can be added later when you further your studies into anatomy or wherever you're going with it. So in the first tutorial, this is kind of a general one because this also works for cars as well, so this is not just for characters. We're going to be creating a simple setup, which is to create reference. So it should be a case where we have something that we can work from in both front and left, and sometimes that's okay for things like cars, though you might want top as well, but also as well the characters you want back. And obviously this can be drawings that you've done in orthographic, so 4 sets of drawings, showing different sides of the character. Or of course if you're working from real life reference, if you're making realistic characters and you're basing it on people, then you need photos set up accordingly. So as you can see, these very horrible photos of me here, they were set up using this grid here to track points. Very simple, just using masking tape. That's all it was. So we'll start the tutorial with a blank slate. Brand new. Right, now we have our blank slate. Let's put it into perspective and snap to the grid. Okay. Right, so first thing we need to do is set up our materials. So you can either go obviously to the material thing, which is completely jumped out of my head. There it is, material editor, or M as a shortcut, if you remember. And we need to put in our first slot our reference, so bitmap, and I've got them set up here, so you can see back, front, side, and you'd need to cut up any sketches you have into this sort of setup. And what you also notice about these is that all of them, if you see down here, are exactly the same dimensions, so it means that I know I'm going to get them exactly right in max, so they all line up, or at least as best as they can line up. You know that you're never going to have perfect reference where everything lines up. It's impossible. It's just the way it goes, especially with cars. People that made the blueprints, for instance, they're never accurate. They never are. You'll be working from front view, you'll go to top view, and it'll be completely different. So these things are never perfect. You have to kind of use your intuition in parts. So we'll start by bringing in the front one. Yep. And nicely we're going to label that front. We can then copy that over to the next one. In fact, I might as well do it for the next 2. Call this one side. And let's call this one back. There we go. So inside, we need to change that image to the side shot. Okay. And in back, we'll change that image to the back shot. I realised before I might have been off screen when I showed you that, but you can see there's the resolution. I think I did actually. So 1493, by 1800. So they're all the same on all 3. Okay, back. Right, now we've got that. Now, obviously now they're gone, right? We'll have to see our resolution. If we forget, for instance, if you just want to see it, you don't want to go out of max. If you go in here, view image, you can always see it by clicking this button here, and that'll show you the exact resolution of what your image actually is. Because I'm terribly forgetful with these things, I never remember. So I always keep that close at hand. Now, in here, I'm going to go to front, okay, and I'm going to work from, it doesn't really matter, I'm going to work from this one. Create a plane, and just randomly click like that for starters. Now, we've got the width and height, so we can put it in here. Now, typically, that would be 1800 by 493, and it is. You can see the shape matches up relatively well. So we can now move that down, and what we want to do is bring it so the base of this is absolutely at 0 and absolutely in the center. So our character is built already at 0 and only little refinements need to be made. So we can close this for the moment because we know all the rest of these have the same resolution. Make sure your length segments and width segments are set to 1. If they're set to something like 4, and something I'm going to say now because it's kind of a neat way, you can obviously just type 0, but if you really want to be just quick and you want to quicken your workflow with these things, just right click on the arrows and that'll snap it to the lowest number. Okay, so we need to convert this to an editable poly and grab the vertex, the lowest point. So in this case, 43.14. So on z-axis, that's the lowest coordinate. Let's grab that and go back to object level. Go into hierarchy, which I always think just looks like a little robot with, you know, like those space robots. Anyway, effect pivot only. And now we can move the pivot down. So paste that number into there. Okay, and also key to make sure, just center that off. Just want to make sure, yeah, it's fine. Turn that off. Make sure that this is now clicked to 0. So once again, right click and right click. There we go, absolute 0. And I will witter on about this, you know, keeping things to the pivot at 0, 0, 0, because it's extremely important. The amount of times when I was first starting out that I made this silly error, it would get put in a game engine, the character or whatever it was never at 0, 0, 0, the pivot was in the wrong place, it would get sent back to me, it was a major pain in the ass. So it's big advice, if you're working on game stuff, right, then make sure that your pivot is absolutely correct. So, and especially with characters, you know, because if your pivot's not, your character could be walking in air. It's just a massive pain. So be careful of that. Okay, so we've got that now, and I believe that's our front view, isn't it? Yes. So we can now apply the front view to it. There we go. And if the resolution isn't sharp enough for you, then you can always switch on hardware, depending on how good your computer is. Mine's alright, so it should be okay. Yeah, there we go. You don't want a too high resolution image, by the way. I pretty much halved the resolution of this from the camera because Max does tend to trip out after a while. But you know, you have to keep bumping up the amount of memory, and unless you've got an absolute monster of machine, then I don't recommend it. So we know that these other ones are the same resolution. So all we've got to do, hold down Shift, rotate. Okay, so we press copy, that's fine. That'll be our side one. Side. So it's making sure it's facing the left one because that's the easiest one to get a shortcut for. Yeah. Okay. And if you have got a case where your reference is facing the other way, then obviously I'd just flip the UVs. I think that's easy enough. But I also think if you just mirror it as well, that'll do the trick. Should do, I think. So we go. Why? Yeah, mirroring it works fine. So I can't believe I actually had to do that to see. That's the sort of state I am in at the moment. But yes, that works all right. For the back, because the way we're going to look at it, a lot of people I've noticed set theirs up in this sort of cross like this. I find that gets in the way, especially if you are working on game stuff. You know, you don't want anything surrounding the grid in the center, no matter how big your object is and how small the grid is. You do not want things crossing over. So I tend to put them right at the back of the model like this. And then if I need to, you can always push it forward later on. So the front one always goes at the back, and the back one always goes at the front. And it will need rotating around 180 degrees. So we can now add the back one to that one. Okay, so that should be it. That, yeah. When it's ready, of course. There we go. So, front, left, and to access back, I have to click up here because there's no shortcut for it. Not entirely sure if you can do that actually. You can apply a shortcut. Maybe you can. Worth looking up. Otherwise, you can always just use these up here to quickly get to it. There we go. See? Nice and quick. Doesn't really matter. So, yeah, there we go. That's it all set up. The last thing we've got to do is basically group all these together. So create a new group. I'm going to call this ref. I'm not going to quit anything fancy. And then once again, I'm going to bring the pivot down to 0. So all of these are at 0. And then we have the option, of course, now everything's all uniform. We don't have to keep it at this scale. We can then bring it down to a scale that's sensible. Okay, so whichever scale you're working to, okay, I tend to normally work to UDK scale. In this case, I'm probably not going to, am I? Scale is another thing for another day. Although I suppose I could include that in this tutorial. What the hell, I will. Customize, unit setup, custom, and change this to US. I just have it as that, Unreal Units. I think it's UUS, most people put it as. And one Unreal Unit is 1 inch, or 1.24 centimeters. It's 1 inch. Just people seem to like centimeters. So there we go, 1 inch. And now you can see that's all set up down there. An average character falls around 92 units high, so something like that. It varies, to be honest, between characters. I think Marcus Phoenix is something like 160, something like that. So you can see it varies. And he's supposed to be 6 foot. But the average character in UDK is about 92 units, and that's 6 foot. So, yeah, you can create a little box like that. And change this to whatever's suitable, so 92 in this case. And then I know that's pretty close. I'm pretty happy with that. If I scale it down just a little bit more, because I'm 6 foot, so yeah, that's not bad. I don't want to overdo it or anything. Okay, and that would be the unit set up now. All set up scale-wise. All done. Ready. So you can build the character to that now. The last thing you finally got to do is freeze the reference. Once the reference is frozen, then, you know, we can't interfere with it. It won't move by accident. And if you right-click and go freeze selection, you'll notice something. It goes white. And I've had lecturers in the past that have been stomped by this. I couldn't believe it, and I flagged it up because it's so simple to solve. If you unfreeze it and you select them and you go to display, a little option down here, show frozen in grey. I do not know why it's on by default, but it is. If you unclick it and go freeze selection now, there we go, done. And it's amazing how many people that stomps. So if we now go into it, front view, there we go, left view, and of course we've got our back view, and it's all to scale and ready. There we go. So that is it. That is how to set up the reference ready for creating a character. or a car, anything that requires blueprints. So yeah, bear in mind, don't obviously think that just because I've done it like this doesn't mean you can't do it with drawings or anything like that. This is the ideal setup for anything like that. One thing I would recommend, if you're a newbie starting out, don't do a model by your drawing, or at least don't make your first character model your drawings, right? The thing I always say is that to create a character, okay, requires study, of anatomy. It doesn't matter if it's sort of one of these Disney-like characters, or like my Zeke character that you've seen in the animation tutorials. It doesn't matter. In order to you think about it, I couldn't have made the hands on him or anything like that if I hadn't studied proper characters. So I recommend heavily starting with real life reference if you're starting out, trying to recreate something, recreate yourself, recreate a friend. Just study basic anatomy first, and once you've got to grips with it, characters are just an over-exaggeration of reality. That's all they are. So once you understand anatomy, you can go that little bit further to create characters. So yeah, don't work from your drawings to start with. Create something from real life. I think I recommend it heavily. In some cases, obviously, some things are dead simple to do. So you could obviously study just hands or body parts, and then create your character. Fine, okay, if you're that stubborn. But I do recommend, if you're first time trying this out, definitely start with real life reference. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to stop right there. Right. Anyway, thank you for watching, and any questions, just let me know.